Shaun Alexander just can't get any love. Coming off a vaunted college career at Alabama, he entered the Seahawks scene in 2000 as a highly touted first-round pick. And he delivered on this potential in full, cracking nearly 10,000 rushing yards and 112 total career touchdowns. He garnered an MVP, set an NFL season touchdown record, and was the first Seahawk player ever to grace the cover of Madden, though he was stricken with the injury curse that comes with that honor. Yet when Shaun Alexander's name is brought up amongst the 12th man, there are few who laud his achievements, and more that will deride and question how good he really was. For Alexander was not the perfect running back. While deadly in the screen game, his stone hands offered little as a receiver. He was dreadful in pass protection, looking completely disinterested and unwilling to forcefully meet any blitzer that came his way. Luckily, he wore such oversized shoulder pads that if he was unable to block the blitzer, the pads at least made the defender take a more fortuitous path to get around him. Others rightfully point out that Shaun had Pro Bowlers and Hall of Famers blocking for him and was nowhere near the same back when those players moved on. But what really embitters fans most in retrospect was Shaun's penchant for going to the ground on little to no contact. Shaun was the yin opposite to Marshawn Lynch's yang. Where Marshawn took pride in turning a negative run into a hard-fought 1-yard gain, Alexander was only seemingly interested in the big play. And this became all the more infuriating when Alexander would suddenly run harder than beast mode once the Hawks got inside the red zone. Fans lamented and wondered why couldn't he run with the same ferocity on every play. At the time, the 12s excused his soft style, hanging their hats on the hope that Shaun's protectionist attitude would preserve his career longevity. Then that went to hell when he broke down and fell off a cliff at the age of 29. The narrative on Alexander appears set and clear, and yet this is not the whole tale of a player, just the imperfections of his game. Sure, Shaun was not the quintessential, hard-charging, prototypical NFL running back, and he didn't offset this by having out-of-this-world moves. But he was unique, using a rare blend of vision, elusiveness, burst, and sneaky speed to bust off big play after big play. 2001 was the first year that Alexander became a full-time starter and exploded onto the scene on Sunday Night Football, carrying the ball the whopping 36 times for an astonishing 266 yards rushing against John Gruden's Raiders. It was an epic night as he posted the third most rushing yards for a single game in NFL history and looked every bit the burgeoning star. A year later, 3 games into the season, questions were beginning to grow whether Alexander's previous year and that epic night in the pouring rain against the Raiders was simply a mirage. The Seahawks were 0-3, and Shaun had yet to even crack 50 yards in a game, averaging an abysmal 2.5 yards per carry. He would have hardly been the first running back to have one good year and then lose his mojo, as the Seahawks most recently saw with Thomas Rawls. Then came Week 4 against the Minnesota Vikings, at home, on Sunday Night Football. Something about the bright lights of a national audience always seemed to cause Shaun to crank it up a notch. On this night, he not only silenced his doubters, but cemented his place amongst the best in the game, setting an NFL record that stands to this day. This was not a great Vikings team. Coached by former and arguably the best Seahawk tight end in team history, Mike Tice, the Vikings limped their way to a 6-10 record this year. With Hall of Famer Chris Carter retiring after the previous season, the Vikings had Randy Moss and little else. As well, this wasn't a close game. By halftime, it was over, and Shaun Alexander was the reason. Prior to the game, the announcers noted how ineffective Shaun had been so far that season. Coach Holmgren seemed to adjust to these struggles in advance, scripting 8 passes on the Hawks' opening 11-play drive. That was of little consequence, as the most important play of the drive was a run up the middle. Shaun flexed his red zone power, stampeding a defensive lineman like he was walking through water for his first touchdown of the year. He sprinted to the sideline in jubilation, seemingly to feel a weight lift. From there on, Shaun was locked and loaded. On the next drive, he busted off a season-long 43-yard run. Alexander's renowned patience made the play go as perfectly timed as Max Strong's kick-out block. But take note as well of Walter Jones rooted like a tree, sealing his man, and Steve Hutchinson dropping the defensive tackle on a nasty cut block. Shaun started to feel himself. On the next play, Walter Jones' man beats him badly, but Shaun bails the Hall of Famer out, using his slipperiness to wiggle free, while also changing direction back to his right to help Hutchinson keep his block. From there, 3 defenders have a direct path to Alexander. But that burst, that sneaky burst, allowed him to zip right past them, leaving a trail of clutching defenders in his wake. The Vikings safety comes downhill late to enter the fray, but misjudges his route to the ball carrier, and Shaun drags him into the end zone for score number 2. Touchdown number 3 comes on a screen pass in the second quarter. The Seahawks offensive line did a great job of selling their pass protection, and Shaun leaks out at just the right time. Here you see why Alexander had all-time type vision, and it didn't just apply to when he took the handoff behind the line of scrimmage. After catching the pass, Alexander approaches 2 defenders poorly blocked. Shaun deftly swivels his hips and breaks a running back cardinal rule by not going north and south, instead choosing west, heading right for the sideline. The unexpected move and its timing causes both defenders to crash into each other. From here, Shaun again shows off his vision, feeling the defenders corralling him towards the sideline. Many running backs would just press the situation until they got forced out of bounds, squeezing out as many yards as they could. But Shaun instead cuts back into the middle of the field. It's not a flashy juke or a video game spin move. It's subtle, but it often led to a touchdown, as it did in this case. On the ensuing kickoff, the Vikings fumbled and the Hawks returned the ball inside the 5. Nothing fancy on touchdown number 4, just fantastic blocking, and Shaun for a second time seems to surprise the defenders with his burst as they crash into each other again at the goal line. 4 touchdowns and a half. A stirring accomplishment, achieved by few. It's the type of stuff that would have made Al Bundy proud. And then the incredible happened. On the very next kickoff, the Vikings returner fumbled again. It was hard to believe what we were seeing, and yet you have not found a single Seahawk fan on the planet that didn't believe with absolute conviction that Alexander was about to get the ball and he was going to damn well score.
Come on, go, run.
Shaun's 5th touchdown on the day might have been the best blocked. At the snap, Walter bends his man like a folding chair. Hutch and Tobeck's double team pushed the supposed anchor 1 tech 5 yards down the field, and Max Strong stops the run blitzing linebacker dead in his tracks. As was a common theme on the day, 2 defenders seemed to have an open look at Shaun, the blitzing corner and safety. Even after a day of having Shaun run past them at will, they still take poor angles and get surprised by his speed. 6 touchdowns would have been an NFL record for a full game, but Shaun would have to settle for just most TDs and a half. Up by 27 points, the team relaxed a bit after halftime, and Coach Holmgren went to more of a short passing game rather than continuing to feature Alexander. 231 total yards of offense, 5 touchdowns, a landmark day in a hallmark career. Alexander blossomed from here, as a few years later he snagged an MVP on the back of a monumental season that saw the Seahawks reaching the Super Bowl for the first time in their team history. Amongst the growing number of Seahawk greats, he'll never be considered the near-perfect player like Steve Largent or Walter Jones. Marshawn Lynch will end up holding the title of best running back for many more years to come. Does he deserve a place in the Ring of Honor? Who knows? But let us not forget. Let us appreciate the elegant artistry of that Roll Tide glider from Kentucky. The Seahawks only MVP.